Richard Tice. Imagine you took the skepticism of an unseasoned accountant, the enthusiasm of a lawn chair, and sprinkled it with a hint of corporate boardroom boredom. And you get Richard Tice. Tice's philosophy reads like the greatest hits album from the world of failed austerity experiments. He's got it all. Cut public spending, free markets will solve everything, and of course the classic, lower taxes lead to prosperity. However, and this is quite interesting, when Richard and others cite the benefits of austerity, it really comes from Harvard, a Harvard Review paper, which actually turned out to have false facts included in it. A student from the University of Massachusetts by the name of Thomas Herden kept trying to crank the numbers from the austerity papers and found that they didn't add up until he discovered that a lot of the facts had been falsified in order to prove a theory, the theory of austerity. But here's where it gets wild. Tice genuinely seems to think he knows better than decades of economic evidence and the giants like Keynes. So let's break down why his ideas aren't just misguided, they're downright dangerous for an economy that's trying to move forward, not backward.
We're in a crisis. You can't tax your way out of a crisis.
Unless, of course, you're the UK post-World War II, where you increase taxes on high incomes and corporations, and that funds the NHS, social welfare, and housing. And this supported economic stability and rebuilt the country after the war, and contributed to one of the longest periods of growth in modern British history. Unless you're the United States in the 1930s, which increased taxes on high earners and corporations to fund FDR's New Deal programs, helping to pull the nation out of the Great Depression. Or South Korea in 1997, which used increased taxes to stabilise the economy. Or Germany in the 1990s after reunification, which increased taxes to fund integration and redevelopment of the former East Germany. You know, apart from those examples, I guess Richard might be right.
You've got to grow your way out of a crisis, and that means reducing the size of the state and motivating people with hard work, taking risks, setting up businesses, being an entrepreneur. And that's how you get growth in the economy. Instead, we're going to get a bigger state, more bloated, more inefficient, and with outcomes, frankly, that are not commensurate with the money that's being poured into the public services.
Well, I noticed you swerved past my question about what you would do, but let's talk about them.
So let's talk about let's come on to what we would do.
Well, no, let's just deal with them. They have said that growth is their central objective,
Correct.
But they can't even get to that point until they've sorted out the hole in the public finances.
You can't grow an economy if you tax everybody to the hilt, to the point where actually it doesn't pay to take hard work.
But they're not going to tax. They're not taxing working people.
Let's go into a bit more detail with another example, the US's New Deal in the 1930s, supported by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the President of the United States, elected 4 times because he was so popular because of these policies. Also, his ability to be a war leader during World War II. These programs laid the foundation for post-war economic growth, and it showed the public that spending stimulates recovery and can strengthen economies. Unemployment dropped from 25% to 15% in just 4 years, and the infrastructure paved the way for post-war prosperity, likes of which had not been seen at any point in human history.
I'll give you an example. There's a roofer I know in the Cotswolds. He had 28 people in his business. It's too hard. The risks were too high. The grief was too much. He's gone down to 2. That's just one example of people saying it's not worth the hassle employing people, all the new regulations, all the new taxes. That is a major inhibitor on growth. The public sector doesn't create growth.
The stuff this man doesn't know could fill a library. Apple became a $2.5 trillion company in huge part, to US defense spending. The very phone that you're using with a touchscreen was developed by the US military. That means it's government owned, but private companies took the idea and ran with it, making it into a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and you have had to pay for it. Or another multi-trillion industry, the internet, which was originally developed by DARPA, a US government organisation. Or satellites, military funded, and they now support logistics, apps, and the GPS industry, worth over $70 billion. Publicly funded tech fuels innovation, and it shows that government investment drives future economic powerhouses. Richard doesn't know what he's talking about. Governments normally lead the way in most innovative industries. What private industry does is take those ideas and cheapen them. That's their advantage. Again, Richard doesn't know what he's talking about.
Let's talk about what you want to do. In your manifesto, I seem to remember you projected cuts of something like 50 billion or thereabouts?
Absolutely. And
in government spending. Let me ask you the question. What would government stop doing?
Well, interestingly, having now been elected to Parliament and with whistleblowers coming to me, frankly, those savings are more than achievable. Whether it's just the inefficiency and the waste. It's the inefficiency, the waste, the abuse of public money. It's everywhere.
Tell me one.
It's everywhere. What I said before is, in your household budgets, in business budgets, you're saving £5 in 100, right? You say the same to all public sector workers. You've got to stop wasting money, reprocure, and it is legendary. It's everywhere. That number is a small number. The other point, you had Lord King in there.
Hang on, stop for a second. If I save £5 in 100 in my household budget, that probably means that the family doesn't get a holiday. I'm asking you, you're going to save £5 in 100 out of the government's spending. What aren't we getting? Fewer border guards for example, in immigration?
Last weekend it was
fewer police, fewer soldiers.
You've asked me a question. Let me answer. Last weekend it was reported that the fraud in the benefit system was £7 billion. It's a multiple of that. It's probably 30, 40 billion. Fraud in benefits alone.
Ah yes, taxing those that are on benefits, a classic one for the right. Despite the fact that we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the G20. Richard still wants you to believe that they are the real evil in this society, but no mention of tax avoidance and evasion by the rich, which totals at about 30 billion. And absolutely no mention of Brexit, that's costing the UK economy about 100 billion a year. Of course, Richard wouldn't mention that.
I get doctors and nurses coming up to me almost every week talking about the waste and inefficiency in our healthcare system.
And of course, he's got to attack the socialist NHS because he wants to privatise it. And while I'm sure there's some efficiency to be found within the NHS, according to the Commonwealth Fund, it's 90% efficient, meaning it's way above the US, which is clearly the model that they're going for. Why would Richard make all of this stuff up? Why would he make out that people who don't work are beneath him? Why is he constantly dragging down the NHS? Why is he attacking refugees and using new words like illegal migration to describe them? As ever, I'm just asking questions.
It is everywhere. 50 billion is easily achievable. The other point, you just had the former governor of the Bank of England in. We should not be paying voluntary interest on all the printed money, which is £30 billion plus a year. Economists now agree with me. That's serious cash. That's how you grow your way out of a crisis.
I know, this was your point about quantitative easing and so on, but OK.
So what he's actually talking about is quantitative easing. The bank printed money and used it to buy bonds in banks to give the money some actual value. This was done in part to ensure there was a money supply and to make sure the markets didn't crash. That money needs to be continually paid off, and paid off with interest, because we have a thing called inflation. If we stop doing that, you know, the thing that caused your mortgages and rents to go up. That's what Richard wants to toy with. When you've got someone like Tice pushing austerity, it's like watching a guy trying to put out a fire with gasoline, only to insist it's cost effective. So he wants to spend less on water, education, police, the NHS. Who does that? What is he talking about? It's clear that we're not paying enough tax to fund everything, and he wants us to pay less. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and once again, thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters. You keep this channel going and growing. If you'd like to help out, there's a link in the description, or you could simply buy me a coffee. Once again, thanks for listening. Bye for now.